It's very important for me because there's no dialogue in this film, and I have to use the other tools of cinema to express what is happening. And camera is one of the most important of these tools, the movement. Um, and so instead of drawing storyboards, which is the typical method used in animation, I actually design all these shots directly in 3D. I make a simple version of this environment and I explore it almost like a live action location scout. And I make discoveries, and sometimes I don't know what I will do. So it's very spontaneous and improvised kind of method. And actually, I want to do these long shots. In Flow, there are some shots which are almost 5 minutes long, and the camera is very close to the characters, following them almost like I wanted it to feel like there's a real person holding this camera, and there are these imperfections to the movement, which is of course an animation is there for a reason. It's not just random. Everything is actually designed, but it shouldn't feel like it's designed. It should feel like it's kind of real, and I think it does feel like that. But because the camera is moving so much, you can't draw it in 2D because the perspective changes so much, and so making it in 3D is the only way we can do it. And I think it creates that immersive feeling where you kind of create this subjective feeling that you are this cat, which I think very exciting to kind of go to cinema and experience what it's like being a cat. I think it's kind of hard to convey this in any other way, and it makes seeing this kind of from the cat's point of view makes everything more emotional, and everything seems much bigger from the small kind of point of view. So it's really important, the camera. I spent a long time on kind of designing all that.
Another question is, why did you start in animation movies? Because real live action movies are so popular all over, and it is sort of a unique way these days. What attracted you to go into animation and sort of make your, well, standpoint on your own now? Because it's the second big one you have, and they really sort of
Well, I would say that animation is just as popular as any other types of films. I think actually they're the most successful films nowadays. So, but it's not the reason why I would choose to do something. Uh, I make I've, yeah, I consider myself a filmmaker, a storyteller, and in animation, I feel like I have more freedom in telling the types of stories I want to do. Because I feel like Flow is a story that can only be done in animation with these animals in water and these very complicated movements. Of course, we can't put real cats in water and have them acting like that. So it's the only way I could do this. But also, when I started and I was a teenager, uh, well, I didn't feel like I could. I had. I tried actually live action films, but I was constrained by the tools I had. By I didn't know any. I didn't have connections in the industry, and but in animation I could take my time and do whatever I wanted. I was only limited by my time and my skills, and uh, and yeah, I like to tell visual stories, and kind of I feel animation is especially great for that. And
were there any artists or directors when you look back in the process before you became the person you are now? Were there any, well, directors or artists you admired? Same for live action, of course.
yeah, actually, I'm mostly inspired by live action filmmakers. By the way, the filmmakers use camera to tell stories, and I think my favorite films are very visual and very kind of cinematic. You have to really pay attention to them. But if you do, you're rewarded by this experience, which you can't really achieve in any other way. Like filmmakers like Alfonso Cuarón, who's of course known for the long takes, but also have these images have multiple meanings. There's something happening in the foreground, but also there's
The layers.
something in the background, and there's this the juxtaposition between these multiple images kind of creates another meaning. And Paul Thomas Anderson and Martin Scorsese and Sergio Leone and
Any animation
Kurosawa.
directors?
Yeah, of course, Miyazaki and Takahata from Ghibli, and I'm a fan of Satoshi Kon, and yeah, again, I love the kind of freedom that Miyazaki has. He seems to very kind of almost improvise the film as he makes it. It's quite crazy that they sometimes start production even before the story is finished, and kind of he's figuring it out on the way. We didn't go that far, but while doing the animatic of this film, kind of designing the shots, I wanted to have that freedom to. Actually, we did have a script, which was of course necessary for the funding.
Yeah.
But after finishing the script, I never went back and read it. I would just like make the animatic based on my memories of the script because I knew it quite well. But I wasn't strictly following it. I would also improvise it, and it was almost like making another draft while making these images. To have that freedom, I think, is crucial because I didn't want it to feel kind of constructed. It should feel kind of discovered.
You mentioned the freedom and everything in your hands and under control. So what is more important for you, to be passionate about the project or have the patience to do a project like you want to?
Well, often people use the word patience when speaking about animation, but in my experience, it's not. It doesn't really something that I have to think about because there's always something to do. It feels like I'm always running and trying to solve problems, and there is no waiting. There's never enough time really, and so there's always something happening, and it's never boring for me as well because I'm not doing the same thing. One day I'm writing, the next day I'm doing the music, and then I'm doing some designs, and it's actually very different types of things I have to do, so it's never boring. And yeah, I think it is important to be passionate. If you spend so long on the film, I think you really have to care about it, because yeah, it's years of my life. It's not just a job to me, it's something that I really care about.
So what is the bigger enemy doing such a project, time or budget?
Time, I guess, but they're connected. If you have a bigger budget, you have more resources and you can work faster. But there's never enough time because, especially in animation, the pre-production, production, and post-production are kind of blended together, and you can always improve things. You don't have that kind of final production day. So basically, the film is just kind of abandoned. You can always improve it endlessly, but you have to like realize that okay, maybe the time is up, but it's also good to have deadlines. It forces you to focus, and also it's sometimes good to have a smaller budget because of course you have more freedom. You can tell more personal stories, but also in terms of production, it forces me to focus. I know some bigger productions sometimes make some big changes very late in the process, but we couldn't really afford that. We had to be very precise with how we spent our resources, so I think having these restrictions can be good. You have to like pay attention and yeah, be more focused. I think you have that can be creatively helpful.
You really give me keywords, because the next question is, this time you did something different, because in the movies before you were director, you were responsible for music and everything. This time you had a team, which means you sort of have to delegate things to others. And the question is, I think it is quite an interesting project when you sort of, before you were all on your own, you were sort of this multiple tasking guy, and now you were really outsourcing a little things and had others help, assist, and work for you. What did you learn about yourself doing it? Is it still with the patience, or is it like when you have others doing things for you who might have a different speed in working, and or let's say a different working experience than you have? How was that?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty personal story to me because as you mentioned, it was the first time I had to work with a team, and the cat in this film also kind of starts out being this independent character and learns how to work together, and that was really intentional to kind of tell a story about the making of the film itself. I did find it quite. It was difficult. I had all this responsibility for all these people, which I took very seriously, and I have like all these people asking me constantly questions all day, and I can't just focus on one thing. I have to think about hundreds of things at the same time, and always have to think. Yeah, I have to switch my mind on these different things, and but I know that sometimes like there are some filmmakers who have this independent success, and then they make a huge film after that in Hollywood, and I didn't want to like make such a huge jump. I wanted to kind of do this process very gradually, and with each of the film, I would like to delegate more, but I was still quite involved in a lot of stuff and flow. I was the director, and I wrote the script with another writer, and
How is it to hand it over? I mean, it's very hard to your heart, very close. It's your baby, and then you have to, well, you teach it how to walk, but then the baby has to walk with the help of others. Is that easy, or did you have a lot of sleepless nights?
it was quite stressful at the moment, but also my intention was to work with people who are better than me at certain things. With a way, my intention was to do all these different things so I could learn how to animate, and I could learn how to do music and sound. So now that I would work with other people, it was really helpful that I understood their language and I could give them notes. But I'm not an expert in any of that. I think a director should know the basics of everything, which is quite fast to learn. It takes a long time to become an expert, but to understand the basics is pretty easy.
Your concept of camera, we already talked a little bit about this, is almost like a character of its own in all of your movies. How do you communicate your concept, this very clear vision, how you want it, with the long shots, with the imperfections that are sort of integrated to have imperfections like they are in life, that not everything is clear and clean and perfect? How did you communicate that to your team? Was that difficult, or was it also sort of a learning process that you, well, had yourself, okay, Gints, hold the horses?
That is actually something I didn't have to communicate because I did that myself. So I could just show them.
Yeah.
And that, it would be hard for me to communicate because I'm kind of discovering these things while I'm creating them. I don't know what the shot will actually end up being. And throughout that process, kind of is revealed to me. So it would be hard to communicate that, and sometimes it's just easier to show certain things. The same with music, because it's so subjective. For everyone, if you describe an emotion, they'll interpret it in a different way. with music. So it was just easier to me the initial version of the music, and then have another composer to help polish it and improve it.
You masterfully, I can only say it's masterfully because it's so beautiful, avoid dialogue. You really rely on what the people see, the music, and have that transport emotions and feelings. Could you please give us a little bit about your collaboration with a composer over the years, or how you were inspired as a composer, how you did it? Just a peek into it.
Yeah, people have asked me if it's challenging to make films without dialogue. And for me, actually, it would be more challenging to make films with dialogue. I feel like I'm more at home, telling stories with images and sounds. Yeah. And of course, music is a big part of that. I do the music, the initial sketches while I'm still writing the script. It's very important to have that process early because it influences the way the story develops. Not only the atmosphere and the tempo of the scenes, but even some, scenes, the outcomes of certain things. And I create a pretty big library of cues, musical cues, and then not all of them, of course, make it into the edit. But I can try if this piece works at this scene or that scene, and I have multiple choices I can pick. But it's important that I have original music. I'm not using temp music from other scores, because I don't think that's a very creative way of working. I think the music should really be unique to this film, and then I can edit it using my own music. But I didn't study music. I'm kind of only know the basics. I don't play any instruments.
So it's autodidactic.
I guess so, but it's quite simple and minimalistic. I wouldn't know how to make very complicated scores, but I like the music to be quite simple, and so that it's kind of built on layers. We have these simple patterns repeating, which I think is which can work great in films. But the emotion and the meaning is kind of built using different layers and sounds. And once I have the initial versions, we brought in another composer, Richard Zalip, who's much more experienced musically, and which was great that he also is a very experienced percussion player. He plays all kinds of instruments, but he has also done both acoustic music but also electronic music, which was important to have a very unique kind of sound. Didn't want just a traditional orchestra. And what is unique about this film, I think, maybe it sounds a bit paradoxical that most of these emotional cues are more kind of electronic, but actually the more playful and fun cues are more with real acoustic instruments.
Still, there is sort of a last question. All right. The technical leap between away and flow now, that's big. So could you just very short answer to what is sort of the technical part behind it?
Well, it's basically because we did have a much bigger team and a lot more kind of people who specialize in these fields were much better than me. And we also spent a lot more time away. It took me 3 years, and this took 5 years, even with the big team and the budget. It was much longer, and I wanted the world to be more kind of immersive, so we see a lot more kind of details in the background, and there's shadows on the characters. In a way, it is more just flat colors. I wanted to have that depth, and but also I didn't want just a typical realistic 3D film. I did want to have that graphical look. So yeah, with each film I'm learning new stuff, and so hopefully there's the next film will also be improved upon this. So I'm still learning, I feel.
Thank you, Gints. It was a very nice meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.